Now, Hollywood is coming a lot closer to home. A £700 million US-backed film and TV studio facility is going to be built in Hertfordshire. The development will create 4,500 jobs, and I'm pleased to say we're joined by film critic Van Connor to discuss all of this. So, we obviously have a bit of a history of having successful film studios here in the UK, but this is a real vote of confidence, isn't it, in the British film industry?
It is. It's part of a growing trend we've seen over the last couple of years of serious movements into developing new infrastructure for the industry in this country, and it's good to see. I mean, we've got Netflix building. They got their UK hub, which I believe was meant to be up and running just before COVID, but had delays. I think Sky were doing one as well. Amazon are building a new studio. Everyone is putting into infrastructure at the minute, which is a very good thing. That can never be a bad thing.
And it's also good for tourism, isn't it? Because we know that big film studios, they end up being tourist hotspots, especially when big movies are made in those. So this £700 million, it will very much be paid back almost in terms of tourism alone.
Well, in terms of just the revenue that it's going to bring in through film production on its own, simply drawing more productions back to the UK, which is already, as you've said, have this long legacy. It's going to be 20 miles down the road from like the making of Harry Potter at Warner Brothers. I forget what the name. I think it's the Harry Potter Studio Tour. Is literally going to be 20 miles down the road. This is a huge deal. I mean, it's going to be one of the biggest we've got as well. I believe it's 91 acres.
And how does it work in terms of films being made there? I mean, will they be already sort of signing contracts with, I don't know what they're called, but the people who are sort of rent out these studios to produce films in them? I mean, how does it all work? Will people who are sort of making films at the moment be rushing to be sort of the first ones to use them? How does it work?
It's just opening up more room to make the thing. Usually, you especially with Hollywood films, with your blockbusters and things, you usually find that there is effectively a queue in place. That The Rock's movie needs to get finished before Ryan Reynolds' one can start filming in there next. It's one of these things where they have to basically find the room for all of these movies to be made. We do make a lot more content now than we ever have. I mean, you remember what the film scene and the television scene was like 20 years ago, and there were maybe 2 or 3 new things a week that got released, and half of them were never particularly up to much snuff. Now we're talking about A-grade content daily. We get a new Game of Thrones every week. We get a new Transformers style action flick every week. So there needs to be more room effectively to keep making this mass amount of content that we're getting.
And presumably, Van, after the pandemic, when so much filming was stopped, there's a huge backlog of material that needs to be filmed and produced. And I wonder, Sunset Studios, who are opening this huge new site, they've got 4 US studios, haven't they, already? Does that give us a hint of the kind of stuff that they like to produce, what we can expect to be coming out of Hertfordshire and this new site?
Sunset is legendarily just part of the furniture for the actual soundstage sort of arena. You understand that we are literally talking about, they're literally hiring an aircraft hangar from these people to film a movie in. And, these are the guys who are building the hangars. And it is give me a case where when we sort of get back to quote unquote normal, when COVID is less of an ever-present thing in our lives and the industry has recovered somewhat, people start going back to work in higher numbers. What we're going to see, I think, is a lot more of an emphasis on physical production, of actual production rather than pre-production and development. A lot of people have spent the last 18 months, 2 years now, just writing and editing and things like that. And the one thing that they've not been able to do, in fact, the only thing that no one's been able to do really, is the filming, unless you were doing it under very strict, COVID safety guidelines. There's the famous Tom Cruise incident, things like that. And going back, I think a lot of people are going to be going back into the room day one, Monday morning, being like, okay, we don't have to worry about writing anything for a while. Here are 9 complete scripts. Let's just go and film these now. And that's the next 2 years of their life taken up.
And what does the future of watching films look like? Because obviously cinemas were closed for, you know, a large part of the pandemic and the lockdown. They've opened up again now. I've gone to the cinema a couple of times, but there's not that same buzz really around cinema going, and you do still have to do, I mean, maybe it's stopped now in some cinemas, but social distancing and things like that. And most people now, they're just watching films on, you know, streaming services, whether it be Disney Plus or Netflix or things like that. And films, I suppose, are now releasing both in the cinema and in the at home, where people can watch them at home. So will cinemas ever sort of return to where they used to be pre-pandemic?
It's a question that is entirely on us, the public. That's down to us and the choices we make. I think that's whether or not we readily embrace the return of cinema. And so far, it seems that we kind of are. In terms of the actual money side of it, Black Widow wasn't the biggest thing in the world ever, but it made some money, just, you know, much to Scarlett Johansson's annoyance, evidently. But like F9, for instance, the Fast and Furious movie that came out recently, was a huge deal financially. That thing is, I think it's like 700 or 800 million now globally. It's been out for about 6 weeks. So I'm just anecdotally, just from people I encounter, my friends, family, things like that, people don't seem especially afraid of going back to the cinema. They all seem to want to just get back to it in that regards. And as far as the social distancing, the policies go, I've not personally found that obstructive in a cinema, but you know, I go to a Cineworld generally. They tend to have their own enforced policies. I don't find it especially annoying or anything like that, but I'm just glad to have cinemas back. Whether or not we keep doing streaming as much as we have been doing and keep cinema on the side of that, again, entirely down to us. This year, Warner Brothers' remaining movies will all still be available on streaming in the US same day as they are released in cinemas. There, of course, is the Black Widow thing going on at the moment, where there is now the discussion of, have they deliberately hampered that by putting it on streaming? Have they fluffed their subscriber numbers at the cost of their talent? Have they angered one of the biggest movie stars in the world to the point that is irreparable? Go and ask Warner Brothers and Christopher Nolan how that one turns out. But like I say, time will tell, and the biggest changes in the industry, I think, are going to be driven by us as the consumers, and they are going to be, you know, decided by what we do.
Well, certainly, as Sunset Studios brings 4,500 jobs, it will also bring, I suppose, extra work for film critics like yourself. Van Connor, really good to get your thoughts this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.